And we're going to talk about the burning bush today, so turn with me to Exodus chapter 2. Genesis, Exodus in your Bible, chapter 2. Second book, second chapter. We're on a series, Hearing God Speak to Me, personally. Hearing God speak to me. The burning bush. As Moses was in the wilderness, he's walking around with those sheep. Bah, boring. All of a sudden he sees this bush that's afire. And it's on fire, but it's not being consumed. And he comes closer. He comes closer. I want you to take home one thing today. This is the take home. As we study these scriptures and as we study the sermon and the passage and the Bible study, this is the take home passage right here. Remember when the two on the road to Emmaus, after the crucifixion and after the resurrection, and they're on their way to Emmaus, they're leaving, and Christ comes walking up with them, and he explains the scriptures to them, and they said, "Did not our heart burn within us? Did not our heart burn within us?" Now, as we study this burning bush today, this is the take home. We are supposed to come closer to God, and we're supposed to hear him speak, and then all of a sudden Moses starts talking to God. Well, who am I supposed to tell them that you are? And he says, you tell them I am that I am. You remember the conversation? This all took place at the burning bush. And as Moses comes closer to the burning bush, he comes closer to God, and God tells him, he said, I want you to take your shoes off, for this is holy ground. Now, have you ever thought about that for a moment? Why take your shoes off? Because God touched the lepers and they became clean. Why couldn't you walk over there with your shoes on and your shoes become clean? Because it's holy ground. What's the deal with taking your shoes off? What do we do with all these shoes? What are we doing with our shoes? We're running, we're walking, we're busy, we're talking. And God says, I want you to slow down. I want you to take your shoes off. Be still for just a minute and spend some time with me. And all of a sudden, our heart starts to burn within us. Here's the two on the road to Emmaus, and what are they doing? The Bible says they are what? They're walking on the road to Emmaus. You know where Emmaus is? Emmaus is away from Jerusalem. You know where Jesus was? He was in Jerusalem. You know where Jesus resurrected? At Jerusalem. Where are they? They're 7 miles away walking. They still got their shoes on, walking. These boots were made for walking. Young people don't even know what I'm talking about. And they're walking. And God says, Moses, take your shoes off. Now, this is the take home for this sermon today. As we study these passages, and as we see Moses getting close to this burning bush, as he draws close to God, God speaks to him, and he starts talking to him, and they have this rather long and lengthy conversation, I think, that took several hours. And God says, I want you to take your shoes off. We're going to spend a little time together. If my people who are called by my name would, we're not all that busy. We're not all that busy. We need to stop being so busy for just a few minutes. Take our shoes off. Spend some time on holy ground. It's holy ground because God's there. And as we spend this time with God, does not our heart becomes that burning bush? Does not our heart start to burn within us? And God wants us to become like that. In Exodus chapter 2, we're going to look at three things this morning. The burning bush. Number one, God's plan for your life. God's plan for your life. We don't have a say over this. Listen carefully. This is God's call to Moses. This is God's election to Moses. Where we're born, who our parents are, we have no say over that. In Exodus chapter 2, Pharaoh commanded all of the babies to be thrown into the river. In Exodus chapter 2, the man of the house of Levi went and took as a wife a daughter of Levi, and the woman conceived, and she bore a son. When she saw that he was beautiful, she hid him 3 months. And when she could no longer hide him, she took an ark of bulrushes for him, Made a little bitty ark, daubed it with asphalt and pitch, and put the child in it, laid it in the reeds by the river's bank. You know the story. The baby got old enough that she couldn't hide him anymore. The Pharaoh had commanded that all the boys' babies be thrown into the river and drowned. They refused to do that. So she builds a little bitty boat for him, made out of reeds and pitch. She puts him in the river, and then she sends his sister, his older sister. Verse 4, his sister stood afar off to know what would be done to him. Then the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river, and her maidens walked along the riverside. And when she saw the ark among the reeds, she sent her maid to go get it. And when she opened it, she saw a child, and behold, the baby wept. And so she had compassion on him, said, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." Then his sister said to Pharaoh's daughter, Moses' sister's hiding over there. She comes running out, and she says, "Hey, you want me to go call a nurse for you, a wet nurse from the Hebrew women, that she may nurse the child for you?" And Pharaoh's daughter said, "Yeah, go get me one." So the maid went, and guess who she brought back? His mama. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages." So the woman took the child and nursed him. You got to love God's plan. You got to love God's plan. Everybody else is throwing their children in the river and drowning them, and this couple right here decides that their family's going to follow God. Their family's going to follow God, and they're not going to throw their baby in the river. And so they save and hide this little baby boy for 3 months until he just starts yelling so much, "Ah!" They can't hide that anymore. And so she builds a little boat, puts it in the river, and here comes Pharaoh's daughter, jerks him out of the river, and she says, "Not only are we going to save this baby, we're going to pay you to take care of your own baby." Now, only God could do that, to pay you to take care of your own baby. This is God's plan for your life. God is in control. God is in charge, and He has the very, 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 very best for you. I've had people tell me, "Well, I want my own plan." I know. I'm watching you follow your own plan. How's it working out for you? And so God's got this plan. We don't get to choose our parents. We don't get to choose where we were born. I was born in Dumas, Texas. Now, when you write that up on a hat and other people that aren't from Texas read that, I had no say in where I was born. I had no say over my parents, and you don't either. God's in charge. God's got a plan for your life, and it's very, very important. God's going to have a plan for Moses' life physically, and God's going to have a plan for his life spiritually. Now, I want you to watch this because this is an amazing story. We don't get this out of this very often, but here he's jerked out of the reeds. He's put in Pharaoh's house. His mama gets to raise him. He's raised as Pharaoh. Verse 10, and the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. So she called his name Moses, saying, "Because I drew him out of the water." Now, who named that baby? Not his mama. Who drew him out of the water? Pharaoh's daughter, and she named him Moses. Do you know the names of the pharaohs at this particular time? This is the 18th dynasty of Egypt. Tutmosis the first, Tutmosis the second, Tutmosis the third, and this is Moses. Now this lady's name is Hatshepsut. Well, that's a mouthful. Just say that fast 3 times. Hatshepsut, Hatshepsut, Hatshepsut. Okay, now let me tell you this. This gets really interesting, but it's really, 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 really important because we don't know this story. Tutmosis the first is going to be the beginning, if you will, of the 18th dynasty. And he's going to have 2 children. He's going to have Tutmosis the second, and he's going to have Hatshepsut, brother and sister. Now, Tutmosis the first is going to die, as all of us do, and as all kings and all pharaohs do. And Tutmosis the second is going to become Pharaoh. He's going to become king, but he doesn't live very long, and he's going to die. Moses has been raised. The reason his name is Moses is because he's been raised as Hatshepsut's son, and when Tutmosis the second dies, she's going to place him, push him forward as the Pharaoh. Now, Tutmosis the third is a secondary person. He's not powerful at all. He's he doesn't hold the status of this brother and sister, Hatshepsut. And when the second dies, Hatshepsut's going to step up, and she's going to impose her power. In fact, when Moses runs away, she actually becomes Pharaoh of Egypt, one of the two women pharaohs, because Moses is going to leave. All right, now let's read this story for a minute. Verse 11. Now it came to pass in those days, when Moses was grown, that he went out to his brothers and looked at their burdens. He saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew, one of his brethren. He looked this way and that way, and when he saw no one, he killed the Egyptian and hid him in the sand. When he went out the second day, behold, 2 Hebrew men were fighting. And he said to the one who did the wrong, Why are you striking your companion? And he said, Who made you prince and a judge over us? Do you intend to kill me as you killed the Egyptian? So Moses feared and said, Surely this thing is known. And when Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. He sat down by a well. Now the priests of Midian, we're going to stop right there. Now, go back with me to verse 11. This gets really fun and it gets exciting. It came to pass when Moses was grown. When Moses grew up? That's not what that says in the Hebrew. You can translate that when Moses grew up, but the word is when Moses was a gadol. And 90% of the time in the Hebrew Bible, the word gadol means hero or great man. In fact, you're familiar with the story of Boaz and Ruth? It calls Boaz a gadol. He was just back from the wars. The reason he wasn't married was because he was just back from the wars with the judges, and he had never married because he'd been in the army. And the Bible says he was a gadol. He was a great man. He was a hero. And this word, 90% of the time in the Old Testament, maybe 95% of the time, means to be a hero. It means to be one of the mighty men of God. And it says when Moses was a gadol, when Moses was great, when Moses was a hero. Now hold that thought for just a moment. We're going to leave this passage for a moment. We're going to come right back to it, but I want you to turn with me all the way over to the book of Hebrews, almost to the end of your Bible. Hebrews chapter 11. (24, 25, 26). It's up on the screen if you need it. But I'd love for you to turn there so you can find it. But if you can't, it's on the screen. We're going to start in verse 24. This is the chapter of faith. This is the hall of fame of faith. By faith, Moses, when he became of age. Our English just doesn't do this justice. When he became of age. In the Greek language, it says when he became mega. Mega does not mean to come of age. What does mega mean? Mega, what's mega mean? Okay, big. If you have a mega earthquake, what kind of earthquake are you going to have? You're going to have a great earthquake. This literally says when Moses became mega, and they translate that when he became of age. And we lose the story of Moses. When Moses became great, you could say it this way. When Moses became, Tony the Tiger, great. Help me. When Moses became great. Okay, so I looked at them and they helped me, but I wasn't looking at you and you didn't help at all. When Moses became great, it says it in the Hebrew, it says it in the Greek. Now let me tell you what Josephus says about Moses. Josephus is one of our great historians that tells us about Israel and tells us about the fall of Jerusalem, and he's one of our major historians that we fall back on. And let me tell you what he says about Moses. He says that down south, the Ethiopians, which is just south of Egypt, had invaded Egypt and pressed all the way up to the middle of Egypt. And they called upon Moses, who was part of Pharaoh's family and one of the great generals of Egypt, and he took the Egyptian army and defeated the Ethiopians. He pushed them all the way back down into Ethiopia again. And you would think, well, now that's a good story, but how do we know that's true? Because there's one passage in the Old Testament. You remember when Miriam and Aaron are mad at Moses and they said, we can be just as good a leaders as Moses can? And Miriam, his sister, Moses' sister, is stirring up the children of Israel, and she says, well, you know, he married an Ethiopian woman. Now, here's what Josephus tells us. Moses pushed that army all the way back down to Ethiopia, and they made a treaty with Ethiopia, and the Ethiopian king gave Moses his daughter in marriage for a treaty between them like they always do. And from that point on, and we know this for a fact in history, from that point on, every Pharaoh that was ever going to become Pharaoh became the prince of Ethiopia first. Now, you would know it from England. If you're going to be king in England, you have to be the Prince of Wales. The crown prince is always called the Prince of Wales and becomes the prince over Wales. The Egyptian king was always called the crown prince of Ethiopia, and if you're going to become the Pharaoh, you become the Prince of Ethiopia, and they always would marry that daughter. Moses actually was that. When it says Moses became great in Hebrew and in Greek, he was in line for the throne. He was in line to be Pharaoh, and he was one of the great generals of Egypt. Now, why is that important? Because point number one, God has a plan for your life, and he trains you physically. He trains you physically. And where you're born and who your parents are and what kind of job you're going to have, you know, you get your job and you think, okay, I'm going to do this for the rest of my life. And God trains us physically for that. And we think, okay, now this is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. And God says, now wait, I'm not giving you this job so you can do this physically. I've got so much more for you. And he's going to train Moses spiritually. So as you turn back towards Exodus chapter 2, I want you to stop in the book of Acts. So start turning left and stop in the book of Acts chapter 7. If you're using your phone, you're going to be in verse 25. Acts 7, 25. This gets so good. We don't know anything about Moses, and we think we know everything. In Acts 7:25, this is Philip preaching a sermon. And he says, he's talking about Moses. Well, I tell you what, go back up to verse 22 so we can get the context so you can see what it says. So Acts 7:22. And Moses was learned in all the wisdom of the Egyptians and was mighty. He was what? He was mighty in words and deeds. Now, what's that talking about? What I just told you. He was a great general for the Egyptians. He was in line to be Pharaoh, and he was a great speaker. You remember later when Moses says, I'm not a very good speaker? And you read these commentaries and they say, well, Moses was tongue-tied. He had a speech impediment. No, he didn't. That says he was mighty in words. He was a great speaker. He's telling God, I've been out in the wilderness for 40 years. I haven't spoken Egyptian in 40 years. I don't think I can go in front of the court, the mightiest king in the world, and talk to him in court Egyptian anymore. I don't think I'm worthy to do that. And God said, who made your tongue? Moses didn't have a speech impediment. Moses hadn't spoken court Egyptian in 40 years, and he's telling God that. But what does it say right here in verse 25? Read the Bible. What does it say? He was mighty in words and deeds. Moses was a great warrior. He was a great general. He was going to be the Pharaoh of Egypt. And listen to what it says. He supposed, well, get the context of it. Verse 24, seeing one of them suffer wrong, he defended him and avenged him who was oppressed and struck down the Egyptian. Verse 25, he supposed, now listen to this, he supposed what? He supposed that his brothers, his Israelite brothers, would have understood that God would deliver them by his hand, but they did not understand. Now this is before Moses ever went to the wilderness. This is 40 years before the burning bush. This is when Moses was still in Egypt. Look at the next verse so you can get the context of it. And the next day he appeared to two of them as they were fighting and tried to reconcile them, saying, Men, you are brothers, why do you wrong one another? But he who did his neighbor wrong pushed him away, saying, Who made you a ruler and judge? Do you want to kill me as you did the Egyptian yesterday? Verse 29, and at this saying Moses fled and became a dweller in the land of Midian, where he had two sons. Now go back with me to Exodus chapter 2. This is one cool story that we know nothing about. Point number one, God has a plan for your life. And he teaches us and he trains us and he calls us physically. And who our parents are, God's in control of. And where we're born, God's in control of. And our job, God's in control of. And God is going to use this job of Moses, this generalship, being trained in the court, becoming great in word and deed, and being a great speaker and a mighty man. Next in line to be Pharaoh. He's going to use all of that in Moses' life, but that's not where Moses is supposed to stop. God has so much more for Moses, and he's going to start teaching him and calling him spiritually, and he's going to interweave these two together as God's plan for his life. Now watch this. In Exodus chapter 2, verse 11, it came to pass in those days when Moses was grown that he went out to his brothers and looked at their burdens. When Moses was grown, when Moses became great, when Moses was in line for the pharaohship, he abdicated the throne. That's what that verse says. And if you don't believe that, I want you to go over and just put Hebrews 11 back up on the screen, 11:24 through 26. Moses is going to abdicate the throne, and he's going to choose for the Israelites. And that's what that verse is talking about right there. By faith, Moses, when he became great, mega, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter. Now that word refused means to abdicate, to give up. The Greek word means to give up or to abdicate. He refused to be called Pharaoh's, go back. I lost it. He refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of God than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin. And he abdicated the throne, and he went out to spend time with his Israelite brothers. While he's out there, he sees a taskmaster beating a slave to death. So he killed him. And then the rest of that passage says, the next day he goes back out and there's two Israelites fighting together. This isn't just two Israelites fighting together. The taskmaster always had a native helper. He would be called the junior taskmaster, and he was always an Israelite. We know this from history. That you had a taskmaster, an Egyptian taskmaster, and then you would have an Israelite helper. And after he killed the taskmaster, he goes out the next day, and this Israelite helper, he's doing the same thing. And Moses doesn't kill him. He just says, hey, you need to stop that. And it says, Moses says, this thing is known. And he fled. And Pharaoh tried to kill him. Well, Moses was the crown prince. Moses was going to be the Pharaoh. These Egyptians don't care if the crown prince kills a taskmaster or not. They're not worried about that. Pharaoh's house can do anything he wants. Pharaoh's kid can do anything he wants to. They're not caring if he killed a taskmaster. What has become known is Moses is abdicating the throne. And he's doing it in a process, and he's doing it secretly, but it's becoming known. Moses said, it's become known that I've abdicated the throne. And then it says Pharaoh tried to kill him. The reason Pharaoh tried to kill him, this is Tutmosis III, who was the weaker of the group, and he's going to try to kill him so he can become the Pharaoh. Moses flees. Are you picking up the story? Moses is a very great man. The reason his name Moses is because he's going to be Tutmosis III. But when he abdicates the throne, then the next guy becomes Tutmosis III. And Moses is going to flee out into the wilderness. But listen, God had already told him, I want you to lead the people out of Egypt. Now here's point number one. God has a plan for your life, physically and spiritually. And Moses had become great in Egypt. He'd become leadership material. He'd been trained in all the great schools, and he was a great speaker. And then God says, but that's not all I've got for you. That's not all. Whatever your job is, whatever you're doing today, men and women, whatever you're doing today, that's God's plan for your life. However, he's got so much more for you. He's got a spiritual plan for your life that's going to intermesh with this, and that physical job is not all there is. He's got a spiritual job that goes with this, hand in hand. What is Moses going to become, and what is Moses going to do? Well, is he not going to become a political leader of Israel? Is he not going to become a general of the Israelite army? Is he not going to need to lead men and know how to shepherd? What's his job? What's God teaching him physically? And then all of a sudden, God's going to train him spiritually. And God tells Moses, he said, Moses, I want you to lead my people out of Egypt. And according to Acts chapter 7, before Moses ever got to the burning bush, he already knew what God was telling him to do. Israel didn't, but he did. He tries to do it on his own. But you can't. Because the timing isn't right. But God has a plan for your life, and if you're listening and waiting, oh, it is so hard to wait. I told you up at the hospital, the one thing I hate doing worse than anything else is waiting. We're waiting in that emergency room for the doctor to come. We're waiting in the emergency room for them to run the MRIs. We're waiting in the emergency room for the nurse to come. We're waiting for the medicine. We're waiting, and I hate waiting. How about you? Oh, if you ever find somebody that tells you that they love waiting, get away from them because they're crazy. This is point number one. This is God's plan for our life, and this is where God talks to us. This is where God tells us. This is where God teaches us. This is the what. This is the what. Listening to God speak to us, this is the what. He does it over and over and over again in our lives for different things, different age groups, different stages in your life. You go through these 3 steps over and over again, depending on what stage of life you're in. This isn't just a one-time thing. Moses had to do this over and over again in his life. This is the waiting. This is where God has a plan for you. This is where you learn the plan. This is where we become quiet and we listen and we wait. Oh, brother. And we hear what God says physically and spiritually, and he's going to put the two together. But then, here comes the next step. God's invitation for your life. Not just his plan, and he tells you the plan. Then he invites you to do it. This is the when. This is the when. In chapter 3, verse 1, 40 years later. Oh, I got to tell you something cool. Chapter 2, verse 16. God's spiritual training. Read verse 16. Now the priest of Midian had 7 daughters. Moses is going to marry the oldest one because she was so good looking he couldn't stand it. And then he's going to go to work for this guy. The priest of Midian. Are you with me? Verse 16, the priest of Midian. Chapter 3, verse 1. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. Who did God send Moses to be discipled for 40 years? The preacher. God took him out of Pharaoh's house and put him in the priest of Midian's house. He put him in the preacher's house. He put him in the preacher's house for 40 years, and for 40 years, this preacher, this priest, disciples Moses. When Moses leads the people out of Egypt, and he's having trouble, this preacher shows up, and Moses said, I need some guidance here. I need some help. I need you to counsel me on some stuff. And the priest of Midian, Jethro, actually gives Moses counsel. Now, here is a guy that was supposed to be Pharaoh. Here's the guy that leads them out of Egypt. Here's the guy that's crossed the Red Sea. And he tells this preacher, he said, I need a little bit of counsel. This guy must have been something. Moses must have really trusted him. This is his mentor. This is who God sent to train Moses spiritually. Now, here comes number two, point number two. God's invitation for your life. God's invitation for you to follow his plan. He's already told Moses what the plan is. Moses has seen the plan. Now, Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the backside of the desert. Notice, Moses doesn't even own his own sheep. He came to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. You would know it as which mountain? Horeb is also called Mount Sinai. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of the bush. And so Moses looked, and behold, the bush was burning with fire, but the bush was not consumed. The bush was burning with what? That's important. It doesn't just say it's burning. It's burning with, did not our hearts burn? God sets our hearts on fire. Moses said, I'll now turn aside and see this great sight. Why the bush is not burned, not consumed. So when the Lord saw that he turned aside to look, God called to him from the midst of the bush and said, Moses, Moses. And he said, here I am. I mean, when you're looking at a burning bush and it's not being consumed up, and then this voice comes out of the burning bush and says, Moses, Moses. What do you do? Do you run away? Or do you recognize God's voice? Why did he recognize God's voice? Because the preacher, the priest, Jethro, had been discipling him and training him. And when God spoke to him, he immediately recognized God's voice. His heart started burning within him. And he says, here I am. He said, don't draw near to this place. Take your sandals off your feet, for the place where you stand is holy ground. Moses, get your shoes off. Stay a while. Moreover, he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, the God of Jacob. Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. Remember what Peter did with Jesus when they had the great catch? Lord, depart from me. I am a wicked man. The Lord said, I have surely seen the oppression of my people who are in Egypt, and I have heard their cry because of their taskmasters. I know their sorrow. So I've come down to deliver them out of the hand of the Egyptians and bring them up from the land to a good and large land, a land flowing with milk and honey. Verse 9, now therefore, behold, the cry of the children of Israel has come to me, and I have also seen the oppression. Verse 10, this is important. Come now, therefore, now. Would you circle it? The word now, now, now. Underline it, yellow it. Come now. I'm going to send you. This is point number 2. God's invitation for you to join him. Hearing God speak to me. Give me about 3 or 4 more minutes and we'll be through. Hearing God speak to me. God says, now. This is the when. This is the when. Now. Come now. I'm going to send you. And Moses said, nuh-uh. We always think Moses, you go, wow, that's really cool. And Moses said, okay, Lord, let's go get him. Moses said, nope. I don't speak Egyptian anymore. You have waited too long, God. But here's the important part. God tells him when. Now. Don't go till God tells you when. Don't move till God tells you when. God tells you, he talks to you at the first, and he trains you physically, he trains you spiritually, he puts this all together, and then God gives you the timing. And the timing is just as important as the what and the where. He said, now I'm going to send you. This is where we get to know God. This is where we spend time with God. This is where we're talking to God, and God is talking to us, and our heart starts to burn within us. This is God's invitation to come to him. This is the two on the road to Emmaus, walking away from God, walking away from the resurrection. Jesus meets them on the road. He talks to them. He explains the Word of God to them, and he says, don't you know that Christ is already resurrected? And he disappears. And they go running back in the dark to where they should have been all along. When they get to the disciples said, did you know that Christ is resurrected? And they said, yeah, he talked to us too. This is where we really get to know God. This is where our heart burns within us. When we take off our shoes. Okay, now let's do the last point. When God tells you now, he commands you to go. God said to Moses, I am who I am. Thus you shall say to the children of Israel, I am has sent me to you. This is my name forever to all generations, in verse 15. Go. This is where we have the crisis of belief. This is where we're going to have to decide if we're actually going to go or not. It's all fun and games while you're talking to God and he's talking to you, and it's all so exciting, and then he says, okay, now I want you to go. And this is not an invitation anymore. The invitation was to spend time with him. The invitation was to go. But when we tell God yes, the last thing is the command. Go. Don't stay here anymore. Get rid of those sheep. Go. Go, go, go. Okay, now, I'd like to close with one takeaway. The takeaway is, did not our hearts burn within us? The takeaway is the burning bush. The whole point of this story isn't about Moses, and it wasn't about Moses being Pharaoh. It wasn't about Moses being great. It's about God. The whole point of this thing is the burning bush. God talking to Moses, Moses talking to God, God saying, get your shoes off your feet, spend a little time with me. And this is the takeaway. We are called, we are commanded to go. We are commanded to pray. If my people who are called by my name would humble themselves and... Okay, now, I told my Sunday school class this morning, I'm going to tell you, don't answer this question. This is a rhetorical question. This is just for you. How much time, or if any, do you spend praying for this nation? My people who are called by my name would humble themselves and pray. Is there a time when we sit down with God every day? And you should have a time that you do that. You have an appointment with God. We sit down every day and we pray for your family. You pray for your kids. You pray for your grandkids. You pray for your church. You pray for your city. God says in Jeremiah 29, pray for the peace of your city. He says pray for those who are in control over you. You pray for the president, the vice president. You pray for the Congress and the Supreme Court. How much time, is there a time when you do that every single day, and how much do you spend? 5 minutes at work. If this whole church would spend 5 minutes a day just praying for our nation and praying for our church and praying for our city, seeking his face, not only would our hearts burn within us, but God would deliver us in a great way. Miracles of God are still very open to us. Here's what God says: if my people who are called by my name would humble themselves, take their shoes off, We're not all that busy that we can't spend just a little bit of time with God and pray, seek my face. He said, then I'll hear from heaven, I'll forgive their sin, and I will heal their land. I will heal your home. I will heal your church. I will heal your city. I will heal your nation. If the church of the Lord Jesus Christ would have an appointment with God at the burning bush, that's your heart when God talks to you and we talk back. And we actually pray. God says, I will hear your prayer. I will forgive your sin. I will heal your land. Got to stop. I'm over. I'm in the same boat you are. Are we doing that? We need to. It actually works. Would you bow with me, please? Father, in the name of Jesus Christ, our Lord, we ask you that you would teach us to pray. Lord, would you teach this church and teach the church and this nation? Help us, Lord, help us to humble ourselves and pray and seek your face in the Word of God. And you will hear. You will heal. Lord, help us to do that. We cry out to you, O Lord, help us become what you want us to be, spending time with you. Make our hearts burn within us, O Lord. Thank you in Jesus' name.